In the frozen wilderness of 1875, Caleb Reeves had one rule: keep moving, trust no one. But on this bitter December morning in the Wyoming Territory, that rule was about to cost him everything, or save it. The blizzard had been raging for 3 days. Caleb rode, hunched against the wind, his hat pulled low, his coat collar turned up against the biting cold that cut through layers of wool and leather like they were nothing. His horse struggled through snow that was already knee-deep and still falling. He was 2 days from the nearest settlement, heading to a ranch where he'd been promised winter work. Cattle needed tending even in weather like this, and Caleb needed the money. He'd been drifting since the war ended 10 years ago, town to town, job to job, never staying long enough to put down roots or make friends. It was easier that way, safer. People let you down. People betrayed you. People died and left you alone anyway. Better to never connect in the first place. The wind howled like a living thing, driving snow into his face until he could barely see 5 feet ahead. Visibility was near zero. His horse whinnied nervously, sensing something Caleb couldn't see yet. That's when he spotted it. Something dark against the endless white. At first Caleb thought it was a fallen tree or maybe a dead animal. But as he got closer, his heart lurched. It was a person. Caleb dismounted and ran toward the figure collapsed in the snow. It was a woman in a buckskin dress, face down, not moving. Apache, by the look of her clothing and the intricate beadwork on her moccasins. He turned her over gently. She was young, maybe 25, with long black hair now matted with ice and snow. Her lips were blue. Her skin was cold as death. Blood stained her dress. She'd been wounded, though Caleb couldn't tell how badly through all the frozen fabric. She was dying. Caleb had seen death enough times to recognize it. Hypothermia, blood loss, exposure. She had maybe an hour left, probably less. He should keep riding. That was the smart move, the safe move. He was already behind schedule and this blizzard wasn't letting up. Stopping to help her would cost him time he didn't have. She was Apache, and that meant complications Caleb didn't need. The tribes in this territory were unpredictable, some peaceful, some not. Getting involved with their people could get a white man killed. Besides, she was probably already too far gone to save. Caleb looked at her face, peaceful despite everything, and felt something crack inside his chest, something he'd kept frozen for 10 years, since the war, since he'd lost everyone he cared about and decided never to care again. Damn it. He couldn't just leave her here to die. Caleb lifted her. She weighed almost nothing and wrapped her in his heavy coat. His own body immediately protested the loss of warmth, but he ignored it. He scanned the area. About 100 yards away, barely visible through the snow, was a dark shape that might be shelter. An old trapper's cabin. Abandoned by the look of it, but it had a roof. Caleb carried the woman through the storm, his horse following behind. Every step was a battle against wind that tried to knock him down and cold that tried to freeze him solid. But he made it. The door hung on one hinge. Inside was basic, a stone fireplace, a broken table, a pile of old furs in the corner. It was freezing, but it was out of the wind. Caleb laid the woman on the furs and immediately started building a fire. His hand shook with cold as he gathered wood from a pile left by whoever had lived here last. Flint and steel, kindling, a spark, then flames. As warmth slowly filled the cabin, Caleb checked the woman's wounds. A bullet grazed on her shoulder, a deep cut on her thigh. Nothing immediately fatal, but combined with the hypothermia and exposure, she was in bad shape. He cleaned and dressed the wounds as best he could with supplies from his saddlebag, boiled snow for water, tried to get some warm liquid into her. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Caleb sat back, watching her breathe. Each breath was shallow, struggling. "Come on," he muttered. "Don't die on me now. Not after I just froze half to death carrying you here."
Hours passed. The storm continued to rage outside. Caleb kept the fire burning and monitored the woman's breathing. Slowly, so slowly, color started returning to her face. Her breathing became less labored. As night fell, her eyes opened. They were dark as midnight and filled with terror. She tried to sit up, gasping, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "Easy," Caleb said, holding up his hands. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him, her breath coming in short gasps. Then she grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "They're coming," she gasped in heavily accented English. "At dawn. You must go. You must leave now." "Who's coming?" "My people. My father's warriors." Her eyes were wild with fear, not for herself, but for him. "They are hunting for me. When they find me here with you, a white man, they'll think I kidnapped you or hurt you. They will kill you. No questions, no mercy." She tried to sit up, wincing with pain. "You saved my life. I do not want them to take yours. Please go now while you can." Caleb looked at the storm still raging outside, looked at this woman who could barely sit up, much less survive on her own, looked at the fire that was the only thing keeping both of them alive. "I'm not leaving you here alone," he said. "We'll figure it out when they arrive. You don't understand. My father is Chief Nantaji of the Chiricahua Apache. He has—" She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Many warriors, so many. If they think you have harmed me, then you'll tell them I didn't, that I saved you. They may not listen before—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Caleb added wood to the fire. "Then I guess we'd better hope they're reasonable men. What's your name?" She hesitated, then, "Aiyana. I'm Caleb Reeves, and I'm not going anywhere, Aiyana, so you'd better get some rest. You're going to need your strength to convince your father not to kill me come morning." Aiyana looked at him for a long moment. Then, despite everything, she smiled. Small and sad, but genuine. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Caleb Reeves." "Probably both," Caleb admitted. She lay back down, exhaustion winning over fear. Within minutes, she was asleep. Caleb sat by the fire, feeding it wood, and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or maybe the first right choice in 10 years.
Aiyana slept fitfully through the night, occasionally crying out in what Caleb assumed was Apache, her body shaking with fever dreams. He kept the fire roaring and periodically checked her bandages, changing them when blood soaked through. By the time the first gray light of dawn started filtering through the cabin's broken shutters, her fever had broken. She woke more alert, though still weak. "How do you feel?" Caleb asked, offering her water. "Like I was shot and left to freeze to death," Aiyana said dryly. Then, seeing his expression, "That is what happened. I am grateful to be alive to joke about it." "What happened to you?" Aiyana's face darkened. "My father arranged a marriage to Nulnish, a warrior from the Mescalero Apache, and political alliance between tribes. Nulnish he is not a good man. Cruel, violent. He has killed 3 wives already. Everyone knows this, but no one speaks of it because he is powerful." "Your father was going to marry you to a murderer?" "My father did not know, or perhaps he did not want to know. The alliance was too important." Aiyana's voice was bitter. "I refused. The night before the wedding, I ran. Nulnish and his warriors pursued me. They caught up to me yesterday morning. I fought. One of them shot me, but I escaped into the storm. I thought the weather would hide me. Instead, it nearly killed me. And now your father's warriors are coming to find you?" "Yes. Nulnish will have sent word that I am missing, that I fled. My father will be furious, shamed before the Mescalero. He will send every warrior he has to find me and bring me back. And when they find me with you—" She didn't need to finish. Jake stood and went to the window. The blizzard had finally stopped,
The world outside was white and still, the snow deep and pristine, beautiful and deadly. And on the ridge to the east, silhouetted against the rising sun, Jake saw them. His blood turned to ice. It wasn't a group of warriors. It wasn't a hunting party. It was an army. They stretched across the entire ridge, a solid line of mounted Apache warriors that seemed to go on forever. 50, 100, more. Jake couldn't even count them all. The morning sun behind them turned them into dark shadows against the red and gold sky, an endless wall of death on horseback. And they were descending toward the cabin. "Aiyana," Caleb said, his voice carefully controlled, "how many warriors does your father have?" She came to the window, leaning heavily on the wall. When she saw the ridge, she gasped. "All of them," she whispered. "He brought all of them." "How many is that?" "Close to 1,000. Caleb's legs nearly gave out. 1,000 warriors? Not 50, not 100, 1,000. He'd faced Confederate cavalry charges during the war. He'd survived ambushes and skirmishes and battles where men died by the dozens. But he'd never seen anything like this. Never faced odds this impossibly overwhelming. He was one man, one rifle, a half-dozen bullets, against 1,000 Apache warriors who thought he had kidnapped or hurt their chief's daughter. "I need to go out there," Caleb said. "Talk to them before... They will kill you the moment you step outside." "Then what do you suggest?" Aiyana looked at him, her dark eyes filled with something Caleb couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe, or sorrow. "I will go out first. I will tell them what you did, that you saved me. But Caleb, I do not know if it will be enough. My father's anger, when he is shamed, when he feels dishonored, he does not always listen to reason. Then I guess we're about to find out how reasonable he is." Caleb checked his rifle, fully loaded. Not that it would matter against 1,000 warriors, but old habits died hard. Then he moved to the door. "Caleb," Aiyana said, "what you did last night, stopping for a stranger, risking your life for someone you did not know, my people have a word for this. Goju. It means more than brave. It means having the soul of a true warrior, one who protects the weak, not for glory, but because it is right. I just couldn't leave you there to die. That is what makes it Goju." Caleb opened the door. The warriors had reached the clearing. They sat motionless on their horses, a semicircle of armed men surrounding the cabin. Every one of them had weapons drawn, rifles, bows, spears. Their faces were hard and cold. And in the center, on a magnificent paint horse, sat a man who could only be Chief Nantage. He was older than Jake expected, maybe 60, with long gray-striped hair and a face carved from stone. He wore a ceremonial breastplate and carried himself with the bearing of someone who had led men through countless battles and never lost. His eyes locked onto Caleb with an intensity that made Caleb feel like he was being judged by something older and more primal than human law. Caleb raised his hands slowly, showing he was unarmed. "I mean no harm," Caleb called out. "Your daughter is inside. She's safe. I found her dying in the snow during the blizzard. Nantage raised a hand. The warriors tensed. This was it. This was how Caleb Reeves died. Shot full of arrows in a frozen clearing in Wyoming, killed for the crime of saving someone's life. Before the warriors could act, Aiyana stepped out of the cabin. She was unsteady on her feet, leaning against the doorframe, but her voice rang clear across the clearing. "Father, stop!" Every warrior froze. Nantage's expression cracked, just for a moment showing relief and something that might have been love before the stone mask returned. Aiyana continued in Apache, her words rapid and urgent. Caleb didn't understand the language, but he understood her gestures, pointing to her bandaged wounds, to Caleb, to the cabin behind them, explaining. The warriors murmured among themselves. Some lowered their weapons slightly. Others remained tense, watching Caleb with predatory focus. Nantage dismounted and walked toward her daughter. An older warrior followed, a translator Caleb guessed. The chief spoke, his voice low and controlled. The translator turned to Caleb. "Chief Nantage asks, did you harm his daughter?" "No. I found her collapsed in the snow during the blizzard. She'd been shot and was dying from exposure. I carried her to this cabin and tended her wounds. That's all." The translator relayed this. Nantage studied Caleb's face, then looked at Aiyana.
She spoke again in Apache, longer this time. Her voice grew stronger as she talked. Several times she gestured to Caleb, and Caleb saw something in her expression that looked almost like admiration. When she finished, Nantage was silent for a long moment.
Then he walked toward Caleb. Caleb forced himself to stand still, to not reach for the rifle still leaning against the cabin wall, to not show fear, even though his heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Nantage stopped 3 feet away. Then he placed his right hand over his heart, palm flat, covering the center of his chest. The translator spoke quietly. "This is our gesture of deep respect, of honor." Nantage began speaking, and the translator followed. "My daughter says you gave everything to save one you did not know. You risked your life in the storm. You used your own coat to keep her warm while you froze. You gave her your food and water while you went without. You protected her through the night when you could have ridden away to safety." Caleb didn't know what to say. "This," Nantage continued through the translator, "is the mark of a warrior's soul. Not all men who carry weapons are warriors. Not all who kill in battle have honor. But a man who saves a stranger's life, expecting nothing, asking nothing, this is a true warrior." Nantage stepped closer and placed his hand on Caleb's shoulder, a gesture that, in Apache culture, was reserved for brothers and sons. "You have saved my daughter's life. My people's lives are now bound to yours. You are no longer a stranger. You are family." The words hung in the cold morning air. Behind Nantage, Caleb saw something remarkable. The 1,000 warriors, as one, placed their hands over their hearts, the same gesture of respect their chief had given. 1,000 warriors, honoring one frozen cowboy who'd just been too stubborn and too foolish to leave a dying woman in the snow. Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years, since before the war, since before he lost everyone he cared about and decided to drift alone forever. He felt like he belonged somewhere. Jake's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I only did what anyone should do." "That," Nantage said through the translator, "is why so few do it." Just as Caleb was beginning to think he might actually survive this morning, one of the warriors on the eastern perimeter shouted. Every head turned. Riders appeared on the opposite ridge, maybe 50 of them, moving fast toward the clearing. Even from a distance, Caleb could tell these were different warriors. Their horses, their weapons, their formation, everything was more aggressive. Aiyana's face went white. "Nalnish," she whispered. "He found us." The translator spoke urgently to Nantage. The chief's expression darkened to something that made Jake step back involuntarily. The rival warriors, Mescalero Apache, Caleb now understood, descended toward the clearing. They were heavily armed, moving with the confidence of men who expected easy victory. They probably had no idea what they were riding into. As they got closer and crested the final ridge, they finally saw what waited for them. 1,000 Chiricahua warriors. The Mescalero force stopped so abruptly that several horses reared. Even from here, Caleb could tell their leader, a huge man with a scarred face, gesturing wildly, clearly trying to decide whether to attack, retreat, or negotiate. Nantage spoke one word. His warriors moved with precision that would have impressed any cavalry officer Caleb had ever served under. Within seconds, they had formed a protective wall, horses and men creating an impenetrable barrier between the cabin and the Mescalero force. Caleb stood behind them, Aiyana beside him, and watched as 1,000 warriors prepared to defend them. The scarred warrior, Nalnish, it had to be, rode forward alone. He shouted something in Apache, his voice carried across the clearing, harsh and demanding. Aiyana translated quietly for Caleb. "He demands my father turn me over, says I am promised to him by treaty, says that if my father refuses, it will mean war between Chiricahua and Mescalero." Nantage rode forward to meet Nalnish between the two forces. The translator followed. Caleb couldn't hear most of the conversation, but Aiyana continued to translate the part she could make out. "My father says the treaty is void. that he will not give his daughter to a man who has killed 3 wives. Nalnish denies this, calls my father a liar and a coward. The tension ratcheted up, hands moved to weapons on both sides. Nalnish says if my father will not give me up, he will take me by force. My father says, Aiyana smiled grimly, my father says he is welcome to try, but he will have to go through 1,000 warriors to reach me. Nalnish looked at the wall of Chiricahua warriors, so many they couldn't all fit in the clearing, spilling back into the forest, covering the ridges. He looked at his own 50 men. The math wasn't difficult. Nalnish spat something that was clearly an insult, but he was already turning his horse. His men followed, retreating back over the ridge. But just before he disappeared, Nalnish turned back. He pointed at Caleb, a deliberate, unmistakable gesture. Aiyana's translation was quiet. He says this is not over, that the white man will pay for interfering, that we have made an enemy who will not forget. Then Nalnish and his warriors were gone. The Chiricahua warriors held their formation for several more minutes, making sure the Mescalero were truly leaving. Only when the last enemy rider had disappeared did they relax. Nantaje returned to where Caleb and Aiyana stood. He spoke to his daughter in Apache, a long conversation that Caleb couldn't follow, but he saw Aiyana's face transform from fear to relief to something that looked almost like joy. Finally, Nantaje turned to Caleb. Through the translator, my daughter will not return to the arrangement with Nalnish. I have been informed that my decision was not wise, that I valued politics over my daughter's life. He paused. A father should not need a stranger to show him how to protect his child. You have taught me this lesson. Caleb didn't know what to say. Nantaje continued through the translator. You have nowhere to go, yes? You drift. No home, no family? That's right. Then I offer you a place among my people. My daughter says you are a warrior with Goju, a good heart. We need such men. You would have brothers, family, a home that does not leave you cold? Caleb looked at the 1,000 warriors still assembled around them, at Aiyana, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, but that made his chest feel tight, at this chief, who was offering him something Caleb had convinced himself he didn't want or need anymore. Family, belonging, a place to finally stop running. I don't speak Apache, Caleb said, which was possibly the stupidest response to such an offer, but it was all his frozen brain could produce. Nantaje smiled, the first smile he had seen from him. My daughter will teach you. She speaks English well, as you see. And you will teach our young warriors about survival in the white man's world. Exchange of knowledge. This is good. Aiyana stepped closer to Caleb. You do not have to accept. You are free to go. But she hesitated. I would like it if you stayed. You saved my life. I would like the chance to know the man who did this. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. Saw not just the woman he'd pulled from the snow, but someone strong and brave who'd fled an arranged marriage knowing it might cost her everything. Someone rather die free than live in captivity.
He understood that. He'd been running from different chains, but he understood it. I'll stay, Caleb said, at least for a while. See how it goes. Aiyana's smile was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Then Tajay clasped Caleb's shoulder again. Good. Then we return to our camp. My daughter needs proper medicine and rest. You need food and warmth. And his eyes glinted with something that might have been humor. You need to learn that Apache winters are much warmer than spending nights in broken cabins. As the warriors began to organize for the journey back to their camp, Caleb found himself surrounded by Apache men offering gestures of respect and welcome. Some touched his shoulder as they passed. Others spoke words he didn't understand, but that sounded like acceptance. One warrior, younger, maybe 20, handed Caleb a heavy fur cloak, speaking in halting English. You give coat to daughter. You cold. Now you warm. Caleb accepted the cloak, overwhelmed by a generosity he'd never expected to find. As they prepared to leave, Aiyana walked beside Caleb. "You know, when I woke up in that cabin and saw a white cowboy, I thought I had traded one captor for another. And now I think perhaps the spirits guided you to me, that you were meant to be there, in that storm, at that moment, that you were meant to save me and—" She glanced at him sideways. "Perhaps I was meant to save you, too." "Save me from what?" "From being alone, from wandering forever without purpose." Aiyana's voice was gentle. "Sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back." Caleb thought about that as they rode out. Him on his horse, Aiyana on a mount one of the warriors provided, surrounded by 1,000 Apache warriors who'd gone from being his executioners to his protectors in the space of one morning. He thought about how one decision, stopping for a dying woman instead of riding on, had changed everything, how compassion had saved his life as surely as it had Aiyana's too. And he thought about how maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running, time to stop being alone, time to finally let himself belong somewhere. 3 months later, Caleb Reeves stood on a ridge overlooking the Chiricahua camp. Behind him, Aiyana approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You are thinking again," she said, handing him one of the cups. "This is when you get the line between your eyes." Caleb rubbed his forehead, just thinking about how different everything is now. Better different or worse different? Better, definitely better. And it was true. Caleb that learned enough Apache to hold basic conversations. He'd been teaching the younger warriors about tracking and survival techniques from his cavalry days, earning their respect. He'd been given his own lodge, had been invited to hunts and councils, had become something he never thought he'd be again. Part of a community, part of a family. Naolnish has not returned. My father's scouts have seen no sign of the Mescalero near our territory. I think he understood the message. Good. But you still worry? Old habit. I spent 10 years expecting the worst from people. Hard to break that habit in just 3 months. Aiyana was quiet for a moment, then, "The winter camp will break soon. In the spring, my people move to the summer grounds in the mountains. It is beautiful there, cool and green. The rivers are full of fish. You will like it." "You sound pretty sure I'll still be here come spring?" "Will you not be?" Caleb looked at her. Over the past 3 months, they'd become something he didn't quite have words for yet. Not quite courting. Aiyana was still recovering from her ordeal, and Caleb was still figuring out who he was in this new life. But something more than friends. Something that felt like it had potential to grow into something good. "Yeah," Caleb said. "I'll be here." Aiyana's smile was radiant and moved closer until they were standing shoulder to shoulder, looking out over the camp where smoke rose from fires and children played and people lived their lives. "My father says you have gaju. Do you know what that truly means?" Aiyana said. "You said it means having a warrior soul, doing the right thing even when it's hard." "Yes, but more than that. It means understanding that we are all connected, that saving another person's life is not separate from your own life. It is part of it. When you saved me, you saved yourself too. You saved yourself from a life of being alone, from a life without purpose or connection." Caleb thought about the man he'd been 3 months ago, riding through that blizzard, convinced that isolation was safety, that not caring was strength. That man would have ridden past a dying woman in the snow, would have told himself it wasn't his problem, would have kept moving, kept running, kept being alone until the loneliness killed him. But Caleb wasn't that man anymore. "I've been thinking," Caleb said, "about that job I was riding to, the ranch work I was supposed to start. What about it? I'm not going. I'm staying here, not just for the winter or the spring, for good, if your father and your people will have me." Aiyana turned to face him fully, her dark eyes searching his. "Are you certain? This is not your world, Caleb. The life here is different from anything you have known." "I know, but it's the first place that's felt like home since before the war. The first place where I don't feel like I'm just passing through." Caleb met her eyes. "The first place worth staying for." Aiyana's smile was radiant. "Then you should know, my father already considers you family. The warriors call you brother who came from snow. You have earned your place here. You just needed to choose it." "I'm choosing it." "Good, because I was not ready to let you leave." They stood together on that ridge as the sun set over the Chiricahua camp, two people who'd saved each other without even knowing they needed saving. Below them, 1,000 warriors lived and laughed and prepared for whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, and among them, Caleb finally understood what it meant to stop running. It meant finding someone worth staying for. It meant accepting that belonging wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing he'd ever done. And it meant understanding that sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. Caleb Reeves had ridden into that blizzard alone, expecting nothing, trusting no one. He stopped for a dying woman in the snow because it was the right thing to do. And that one act of compassion, that one moment of choosing humanity over self-preservation, had given him everything he'd been running from for 10 years. A home, a family, a purpose, and maybe, if he was brave enough to let it happen, love. The snow began to fall again, gentle this time, not the killer storm that had nearly taken both their lives. Aiyana lifted her face to the sky, letting snowflakes melt on her skin. "It is the first snow of the season. My people say it is good luck, that it brings new beginnings." Caleb watched her. This woman who was dying in the snow 3 months ago and was now so fully alive it took his breath away. "Yeah," he said softly, "I think they're right." And for the first time in 10 years, Caleb Reeves believed in new beginnings. If you enjoyed this story of courage and unexpected family in the Old West, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Jake's position? Have you ever had a single decision change the entire course of your life? Share your stories, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of honor, compassion, and the bonds that form when strangers become family. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.